Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello and welcome to Material for the Brain, episode number 6. Today is the first episode for 2021. And in this solo episode, I'm going to be sharing some perspective about the topic of self-expression, authentic expression, finding our own voice. Before we're going to dive, just a few things. First, I received some feedback from few people about the audio quality. So I've been trying to improve the setup and to do some more post-production on the audio. I hope you can hear me better. And please feel free to share a feedback as the podcast is still, let's say, in the emerging phase. So any feedback also on the technical aspect is I appreciate it very much. So feel free to drop me a message if things sounds and looks better. And the second thing, I have a short announcement. I'm gonna be doing an open seminar at the end of January, an online seminar that will take place on the 29th until the 31st of January. And the topic of the workshop is to some degree also connected to the podcast. The name of the workshop is Spine IQ, Technical Inputs into Creative Expressions. So we're going to be looking at the spine, movement of the spine, and we're going to examine it through the technical lens and the expression lens. And when we talk about technique, we're going to be looking at different patterns like spiral mechanic, waves, figures of 8, circles, sequential movement, etc. And after establishing a certain base of understanding, we're going to be translating and using those technical capacities into finding our own way of expressing ourselves, looking at character, musicality, movement quality, mindset, etc. And I would like to offer you, the podcast listeners, a special discount of 10% for the seminar. And you're welcome to visit the website under movementlab.eu/spine-IQ. And you will arrive to the workshop page. I will also leave links at the description of the podcast, so you don't have to remember it. And you can use the coupon of Spine IQ 2021, and you will be able to access the workshop at a discount price. And of course, I'm very happy to see you there and to also get to know you in a bit more personal way in the seminar. Okay, let's start diving into the topic of today. What is self-expression? What is authentic expression? I think to a certain degree, there is a certain established understanding of what does it mean to express yourself. And we tend to favor activities like art or design or craft, people who are producing things that working with the hands, drawing, working with clay. And I think that to a certain degree, it's very easy to connect it to self-expression because of the lack of utility. When I'm engaging in making a dance, I'm not doing something that has any purpose. So to some degree, if it's not connected for self-expression, so why am I doing it? And there is some truth in it, in this understanding and in this kind of hierarchical look at the idea of self-expression. But I came to believe or to experience that there are many other layers to the topic of self-expression. And today I would like to take quite a personal approach into looking at this topic, and I want to share with you more personal things about how did I arrive to where I am today, and how did my personal journey, that is very much connected to this question of what is my authentic expression, how does my personal journey, what can we draw from my personal journey that is maybe a little bit more general and can and might also help you. Especially now, it's a good time to ask questions. No transitions. We are transitioning from one year to another. It's a good time to ask questions. So I would like to maybe start with one thing that happened to me in my life, and I think that's sometimes is a motor, is a driving force to discover your way of expressing yourself, or a driving force to ask the question, what do I want to do? How can I express myself in the world? And that's connected to external situation where your inner voice is really suppressed by your environment. And me, I grew up in Israel, and at the age of 18, I had to join the Israeli army. And it was by law, every man had to serve for 3 years. And at this age, I wasn't yet mature enough to recognize that I could choose differently. And I went with the stream, and I went with the flow, and I joined the army. And during these years that I've been there, I've started to notice that since I didn't had so much ability to affect my day-to-day reality, and I had to follow what is happening to me, or to kind of witness, okay, so now we are going to this base, we have that mission, we are doing training, and I just had to follow. And so I started to recognize that I'm more observing what is happening in my life, and I'm not really guiding my life. And within the system of the army, there was certain pathways that you could choose in order to affect a little bit what is happening to you. Of course, one way that certain friend of mine chose to do is to climb the hierarchy, in the hierarchy of becoming a commander, an officer, etc., and kind of diving into a semi-career within the army. But that wasn't very attractive to me. And due to this kind of prolonged period of time of not really choosing almost anything about my life, I started to recognize that I have a really kind of a strong lack in expression. I really realized that it's something very meaningful that I'm missing in my life. And to a certain degree, I think it's something universal. So even people who are not doing any so-called creative work and are still in a need to find places to express themselves. And definitely, in the army, I didn't do anything creative, and it got to the point that eventually I had to stop it. And after 2 years in the army, I decided to stop complying with the system, and I had a personal rebellion. And my decision to act in resistance to my reality led me to arrive into a different place. And eventually I found myself finishing the last year of my army service in a unit where we were responsible to sew equipment. So I've learned how to work with a sewing machine, and suddenly my day-to-day life were full of expression. I would I would have to choose fabrics to cut them, to make different things. And there was a lot of room for creativity. And that was a starting point for a bigger process that is connected to choosing, the ability to choose, the ability to recognize what you need and to act upon it. And then when I finished my army service, I had a 1 month of a vacation that I was still a soldier, but I was already off at home, waiting for this month to finish that I can bring back all the equipment and move out of the army completely. And I've decided to go and explore meditation. And I've signed up for a Vipassana meditation retreat, 10 days silence retreat. And I had some influence of some people in my life that were practicing many years meditation, and it was always somehow, I was curious about it. And this curiosity led me to join and do the meditation retreat. And after finishing this retreat, I recognized that, wow, I've experienced something that is fundamentally touching me, and it's very, and I feel that there is a lot of potential in it for me, for developing, learning, and I think that due to the fact that I was in such a starvation from this long time in the army, and even that in the last year I had more creativity and more ability to choose, I was still operating under this very rigid system. So the idea of diving into the world of meditation was very attractive to me. And I flew to South Africa and I lived for 6 months in a Vipassana meditation center, doing a lot of silence retreats, serving others in doing so, etc. And that's, in a way, what happened to me. I think it's something that many people can find themselves in such situation. And my particular situation was being in the army, but maybe your particular situation can be, I don't know, studying in the university, or working for many years in a job that you're not happy about, or living for too long in a relationship that isn't satisfying for you, or etc., etc. So sometimes living in circumstances that are not optimal for you can really take you into a process of neglection of expression. And now you can also ask yourself, what is the relation between meditation and self-expression? Because to a certain degree, there is no connection. When you sit and meditate, what do you really express? And how is that an authentic expression? But I think that, again, if we look at self-expression as something that is only related to generating something, so yeah, maybe then I would agree that sitting and meditating is not so much connected to self-expression. But I think that there is other layers that are connected to the idea of expression. And one layer is in relation to your own definition of the self. And when I went to the journey of diving into the world of meditation, and I was quite young, I was 22. And even though that by practicing meditation, let's say the utility of the practice was to deconstruct the ego and to actually observe those processes of building false assumption on the self. But for me, the act of engaging in such activity actually served me in doing the opposite. So being in a meditation center and dedicating so much time for it started to initiate a process of identification with this kind of role. So I was Matan, the meditator, Matan who found a meaningful path to walk in my life. And I already, at a certain point, I remember while I was in South Africa, I already had this kind of imagination. Okay, so I found my purpose. I'm going to be meditating and I'm going to be moving from different centers and sitting, doing retreat, serving other people in their retreats, and that's it. And that's enough for me. But that was, of course, quite a naive realization of a young adult. And I was not so much in touch with other forces that have eventually pulled me away from that. But that was my authentic self-expression in that period. I was Matan, the meditator, and I'm sure if you would have been meeting with me at those years, you might have sensed it about me, because I was very busy with that. So sometimes just the things that you're doing can start to, again, like you're engaging in something, you start to identify with it, and that becomes your way of expressing yourself, even if that activity is not immediately connected to the idea of self-expression. Now, another way of encountering the topic of expression is through passion. And that's something that is also very connected to my life story. And so sometimes you can find yourself in situation that you're discovering something that you have tremendous amount of passion towards it. And through the passion, you start to engage more and more with what you're doing, and that becomes eventually an intuition for you. You intuitively express yourself through the thing that you are passionate about. And if I go back to the young adult that I was, so back then in the meditation center, I didn't have a lot of relationship to my body when it comes to movement and physical expression. I was a basketball player as a teenage, in my teenage years. And of course, serving in the army was very physically demanding. But when I was in South Africa, I didn't do anything physical. I was meditating on average for 6 hours a day. So I was mostly sitting. So I had a lot of connection to my body sensations and to other qualities of attention, but I wasn't really moving, and I didn't have a direct relationship with my body. And when I moved away from South Africa, and in my little journey, I ended up in India. I had some little experiences with yoga, not anything profound, but just a taste. And eventually, when I came back to Israel, one major event that created a kind of a chain effect was that somebody recommended me to go and join a contact improvisation jam. And that was the first time that I encountered the idea of dance outside of clubbing. So dance in a room where there is normal light and people are engaging in moving their bodies in different ways. And of course, contact improvisation, for those who don't know, it's a form of partner dance that has been developed in the USA during the 70s. So there was also touch and partner work. And I was very fascinated about it, but I had strong internal inhibitions to actually connect to what was happening in the space. But I remember that there was a certain aha moment of, wow, what is that? And I think when those moments happens to us in our life, they are sometimes connected to potential authentic expression. So when we discover something that really moves us from inside, there is a certain call for us there. And that was definitely the case for me. And I found myself in another coincidence, again, engaging in contact improvisation. And through another coincidence, I found myself joining a weekend intensive of contact improvisation. And eventually I've found myself signing up for a dance school, very special school that is called The Group, which back then it operated in the city of Jaffa. Now it's in Tel Aviv. And it was a special school because they enabled anybody who wanted to dance and to learn dance professionally. And when I say dance, I mean contemporary dance, to join. And normally when you go to a dance academies, you need already to come with quite some background. So you need to know how to dance before you can learn dance. So it wasn't the case in this school. It was a special school that enabled anybody, only based on your commitment to the process, to join the education. And I started to engage with something that was really moving me from inside. So I had tremendous amount of passion to it. And at the same time, I also started to look at it as something that might be connected to profession, that might be connected to something bigger than just this excitement. And at the same time, I also, 1 year after I've graduated from this school, it was a 2-year program, and I decided to only do 1 year. I met my wife, and so I started to develop kind of simultaneous relationship with two entities: my wife, a real person, and the dance wife, which I had also tremendous amount of passion. And that's something that started to create a certain conflict that I think that can happen many times when we find authentic expression through really diving into our passions. And in my own case, again, it was this kind of obvious tension between the practical commitment that I had to my wife, that back then in the beginning we were just partners, but then later we also got married. So the commitment that I had to her, and this internal commitment that I also had towards developing myself as a dancer. And not too long, the negative aspects of this mix between passion and expression started to take place in my life. And I think that that's something that's worth talking about. And why it's worth talking about? Because I think that to a certain degree, and I would speak mainly for my field, because I'm not that aware how is it in other fields, but in the movement field, in the contemporary dance scene, in the contact improvisation scene, there is a lot of people who aspires to make a living out of their passion and to connect their passion into something practical. So there is already some connection to ambition and to make something out of your passion. And that's very attractive, because when you discover something that you're passionate about, then you're connected almost immediately into expression, into self-expression, and you find a channel to put your energy into in an effortless way, which is different, for example, to what I've told you about my experience with meditation. That was something that came out of lack of self-expression, but I wasn't motivated by passion there. So there is a big attraction. You discover something, you love it, you feel like, wow, I can do it the whole day. I finally can express myself, and that's very attractive. But there is a certain potential for something else. And that's something that happened to me in my personal stories, and I think, again, it's worth sharing a little bit more about it. So in my own case, what happened is that I've decided to do an audition for a dance education in Austria, and I got accepted. And that was a very, very attractive possibility for me. And my wife keeps reminding me that I told her that I got accepted to the dance school 3 days before we got married. So there was a lot of pressure on her as well, but she was much more flexible than me back in those days, and she decided to join the adventure and to stop pursuing her own dreams at that time and to join me for my dance education in Austria. And that's the point where I think something crucial can happen, is that when you follow your passion so strongly, you might compromise your ability to sense other people's needs. And I had a very obvious connection to this phenomena because I was living in a steady relationship. But it doesn't have to be the case. You can also live completely by yourself and isolate yourself due to the fact that you are very passionate about something. So passion and self-expression has tremendous amount of relation to the social realm. And humans, we are social beings, and it doesn't matter in which way you engage in building relationship with other people. We all have relationships. And again, I think that passion is something that can really inspire us, but again, can take us into places where we might compromise things that are not good for us on the long run. So, and again, in my case, I found something that was so intuitive for me, and it was really like a discovery of something that I should have done all my life. That's how I felt when I discovered dance. And another thing that happens to many people when there is this connection between passion, self-expression, is that we might start building up a wish to connect our way of expressing ourselves into the way we solve the materialistic problem. So in order to connect it to a mean to make a living. And there's a big illusion there that I think that is not well discussed, or at least I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. And maybe I'll start by sharing a small anecdote that several years after I've graduated from the dance education, I was engaged with making art. I was getting funding from the city of Vienna to produce dance work, performing on stage. And I've developed my own teaching practice. So I was traveling mainly in Europe, teaching workshops. And there was a person who I never met in person, but who also was starting the first steps of connecting to this passion. So kind of he was in the same place that I was several years before. And we had some short chat on Facebook, and then he wrote me something like, yeah, it seems like you're really living the dream. So from his perspective, me teaching some workshops and performing on stage, that was living the dream. And of course, in my own reality of the day-to-day, I didn't feel I'm living any dream. I was slowly going into a path that offered also many challenges. So the moment I started to connect my way of expressing myself into the way I want to make a living, there was a lot of other things that came into the table that I wasn't necessarily interested in. And there is this sentence, I don't remember I think it's from the Chinese philosopher, if you find something you love, you wouldn't work a day. And I think that it's a big illusion, because no matter in what kind of work you engage, there will be many, many things that you're not interested doing, but you will still have to do. And one thing that I can speak about, and I think that it's also quite relevant to expression, is promotion, social media. So one thing that I've discovered quite early is that if I want to enable my content and my workshop to reach people, I have to build a constant relation to social media. But it wasn't very attractive to me from the beginning. So I was born in '83, and I postponed joining the social media for many years. So I've opened a Facebook account kind of towards my end of my dance education. So I was not really, it wasn't my natural playground. It wasn't where I was comfortable. And social media is a big place that relates to a certain degree to expression. To everybody can shout whatever they want, everybody can post whatever they want. So we are really using social media a lot to express ourselves. And I think that maybe the reason why I would like to take a moment to talk about it, because in social media, there is a certain phenomena that can happen also, of course, outside of social media, but it can really, we can really fall much quicker into this spiral in the social media realm. And that's the phenomena of starting to compare ourselves to others. So this is something that wasn't new to me. And I think that everybody who went through dance education has found themselves comparing themselves to others, especially when you're doing a class in front of a mirror and there's anybody who have done ballet class for sure looked around and checked how the others are doing. It's very hard to really be in your own bubble, but it doesn't make any sense. And in social media, it's even harder not to start to compare ourselves, because we all know the nature of the technology and what kind of content people are mainly sharing. But there is no sense in it, because nobody have walked the path that I've walked to get to where I am. So why would I even expect myself to be in any similar position to somebody else? And another thing that is challenging in social media, of course, is that everything can be put down into a number. How many likes we had, how many followers, etc. And for many years, I didn't find any authentic way of expressing myself in social media. And I was constantly comparing, looking what others are doing, what kind of material should I post, how should I post it, in which language. And I think that only now, with this podcast that you're listening to, I've started to really find my own voice in a way that is authentic. And I think a good way that you can always ask yourself is, how difficult is it to you to do what you're doing? And when you're doing something that is creative, but it's easy for you, that's a good indication that you're on a realm of finding your voice, of finding your authentic way of expression, which again is something that to a certain degree we all need in different quantities and in different contexts. And one thing that I can see a certain thread through everything that I've shared with you until now is this kind of notion of individualism, of this individual search for self-definition. And this is a theme that is really present in the world through many ways, through how we organize society, through culture, economics. There is a lot of drive and push from the outside to answer this question to yourself. Like, who am I? What do I want to do? What kind of a person am I? What I'm going to live after I'm gone, etc. But one realization that I can share from now is that I think that the only maybe not the only, but the real power of the notion of individualism is the ability to completely dismantle and move away from any need to comparing yourself to others. And again, because you're individual and because nobody is like you, you should not expect yourself to perform like anybody else. And that's the real power of individualism. And in my own story, I wasn't thinking like this. I was really going into this path of what many people will say, developing the self by investing in the self. So I was really investing in myself, a lot of time, investing in my dance career, investing many hours in the meditation journey, etc. But again, the main thing that I compromised with this approach was the ability to sense the needs of others. But then another major event happened in my life, in relation to my wife, is that my first daughter was born in 2014, Ariel. And initially, her arrival to the world, which was full of excitement and love and what most parents experience, I guess. But still, I wasn't ready to give up, or I wasn't ready to let go of the self that I've invested so much in. So the conflict that I had throughout my dance education and career with this kind of notion of competition between my private life and my professional life just got amplified with the presence of my daughter. And only 3 years after, where my son was born in 2017, things started to change. And what have started to change is that, again, because there was more and more tension building up between what I have perceived back then as my need for expression and my need for time to share my message and time to invest in me. So the tension between this and my family, who needed more and more time and attention, the tension came to a point that, of course, it had to explode. And there had to be a certain earthquake. Something bigger had to happen. And that's mainly because I didn't recognize it on time. So it's not that it has to happen to anybody, of course. But that was a really, really profound thing that happened to me in my life. So to a certain degree, until then I separated self-expression from anything that wasn't related directly to my career and my work as an artist and as a movement teacher. But slowly, by taking small steps and really embodying the role of being a father, I started to discover other ways of expressing myself, ways that were not that obvious when I was still really busy with dancing. And that leads me to another really important definition of self-expression. So self-expression as a mean not to develop the self, but to invest in others. And to a certain degree, I think that it's kind of an inevitable path that we will end up there in this recognition. And if we don't, there is a certain psychological development that doesn't take place. But the recognition that in order to really develop the self, you have to stop investing in the self, and you have to start investing in others. And that brought a different quality, a certain quality of listening, Because when you want to start investing in others, first you have to learn how to listen. And I was very, very much connected to listening to my own voice. So recognizing what do I need, what do I want, which is a very important quality. Of course, if you have zero connection to yourself and you don't know how to listen to yourself, you can, it's like living in the army your whole life. You're never the one who is in control. You're never guiding the process. But listening is a complementary quality that is also very important. And during those years, I started to really develop the ability to recognize what others around me need, and how can I be supportive for that. And in an interesting way, it started to come back towards my teaching, because when I got to the point that this tension was so strong between my passion and the way I express myself and my family, one decision that I took is that I decided to stop teaching. I experienced a certain burnout, and when there was so much tension around my career, it stopped being meaningful. And in 2018, which was 1 year after my son was born, I kind of accomplished many goals that I set up for myself, in specific relation to my teaching practice. I was very ambitious to break out of the European circle and starting to teach internationally. And in 2018, it happened. I was invited to teach in Hong Kong and in Tokyo. And then later, I had also a tour in the USA. And I really remember that towards the end of my time in the USA, I really didn't have a meaningful answer to why am I doing it. So something that started as a very, very clear way of expressing myself slowly transformed into something that didn't have any meaning, mainly because of the amount of conflict that it brought to my life. Now one can ask the question, so maybe we should isolate ourselves when we have the passion and not let anybody interfere. And maybe that's could be a strategy for some people. I'm quite doubtful that it's going to be very healthy. I think that being lonely is not something that anybody can sustain for long periods of time. So I've lost the meaning of why am I teaching people? And again, when I think about the embracing the role of the father, new qualities started to emerge and new interests. So I started to recognize, wow, listening as a quality is very important. And before that, I was also teaching in a different way, maybe with less listening as a quality of teaching. And another important milestone was a certain period that I started to be in a more close contact to my parents when it comes to their own bodies. And I started to help my father a little bit and my mother to deal with certain problems that they had. And there I've started to find slowly a new definition emerging of why am I doing what I'm doing. And slowly it started to move from this kind of ambitious drive of being being on stage and teaching internationally and celebrating myself and my success into something more humble of, wow, actually I can help people. I can do something that can be meaningful for individuals on a very profound level, even if it's behind the curtains, even if nobody sees it. And I started to recognize that the main theme that drives me towards teaching is the question of how can I enable people to develop a more meaningful and sustainable relationship with their bodies, because back until this day, back until those experiences with my parents, I mainly worked with people who already had a lot of relationship with their bodies. And I think that this flexibility is very important when we talk about self-expression. So when you find something that you feel like, wow, that's something I can genuinely be busy with, it's really important to maintain a certain flexibility in allowing the same thing that you are building to change its shape and to dissolve into something else. And this is something that clearly happened to me. So I started with something very obvious, that was pursuing a dance career, and ended up helping people relating to their bodies, which you can of course draw some linear line, but conceptually we are talking about things that are very different. And again, in my own personal story, the biggest thing that I've learned is by enabling this flexibility and enabling myself to discover new shades of self-expression, is again moving away from the idea that only by being obsessed with myself I can develop myself. And I think that in many fields this message is present, and again it's related to a certain degree to the way our society is structured. We are scattered across many different professional fields, and every individual is starting to be more and more specialized in whatever they are doing. So in order to be successful, you have to dedicate more and more and more time in order to be able to climb in the hierarchy of competence and improve yourself in whatever you're doing. But that's only one way of being. And that leads me to maybe the last kind of chapter, and that's the question of in which other realms can we find self-expression. And I think that it's completely not necessary to connect it on an immediate level to your way of earning money. And passion doesn't need to be the only thing that you are looking at when you think about taking these choices and asking yourself those questions. And I think my wife is a great example for that. My wife is a dentist, and when she was young, she was quite a hippie. And I think if you would have asked her when she was 20, what kind of profession would she imagine, she would never say dentist. But nevertheless, that's what she studied. And what was very beautiful to witness is that within the umbrella of dentistry that is quite wide, she found a place where she can really express herself. And that's with working with children and working with people who have a lot of anxiety. Because my wife, one of her most authentic qualities is the ability to care for others. So to genuinely be worried that others are fine. And who else need that than kids and people with anxiety who comes to the dentist? So she found herself in quite a rare position where there's not a lot of dentists who has this genuine care and interest in people. And she can bring something into her professional field that is very genuine. It's very authentic. And she can feel really present in what she's doing. Even though that initially there's no connection to, let's say, an obvious passion. And you can also find qualities of self-expression in things that are not at all connected to earning money. It can be a hobby. It can be the way you handle your garden. It can be the way you're making your food. For me, that's one of the most easiest way of a self-expression is cooking. And it's something that you also have to do every day for yourself. And again, there's so many other ways that we can connect to this human need of expression. So what I'm trying to encourage is to kind of break this paradigm and this hierarchy that those of us who are engaging in professions that are connected to their passions and are directly linked to mechanisms of self-expressions are those who are living the good life. And what I would like us to, what I encourage us to take a deep look is what are the internal mechanisms that I am building for myself to prevent myself from finding places for expression, finding places for authenticity. Because eventually, I'm a big believer in self-responsibility and looking at yourself when it comes to the main force of driving change into your life. So I'll repeat it again. What are the internal mechanisms? Because they are mainly internal mechanisms that I'm building for myself to prevent the possibility for self-expression. And one thing that is kind of inevitable is that we have to enable ourselves to let certain things in our life die in order that other things will reborn. So I needed to let go of this self-image that I've built for many years and to really let the dancer, the artist, the teacher die. Not on the practical level, I'm still doing the same, but to let something internal die so that something else can reborn. And actually, maybe I can share with you another personal short story that just happened a few days ago with my kids. We took the bus and we drove next to a graveyard, and my daughter was curious, what is this place? So we explained her, and then we found ourselves talking more and more about the concept of death. And then my daughter asked me, Papa, so what happens when we die? And of course, how can you answer such a question, such a complicated question? So I told her, hey, Ariel, that's the most mysterious question. Nobody knows. And then my son, who is not even 4 years old, he immediately said, Papa, I know. We simply grow again. And I think that that's a message that I would like to take with myself towards 2021. And this naivety of my son has very, very deep knowledge and deep message for us to really enable ourselves to die in order that we could reborn again and rediscover new things. And what can be more of a perfect timing than this end of 2020 that was a very challenging years for humanity, and to take the time to reflect on what are the things that I want to let go, what are the things that I want to enable them to die, which part of inside of me needs to die, that I can give space for new things to be born, that I can more and more connect to myself and connect to my authentic way of expressing myself. So I would finish by wishing you a happy new year, and I hope that you will have a wonderful year, achieving many things that you want, and that hopefully we will have more possibilities to connect with each other, with other people, and to find our authentic self. For more movement-related content and educational training programs, visit our website at www.movementlab.eu.